Hey y'all, today's guest is Ted Davis. Ted does it all. Ted is a music editor for Merry-Go-Round. He's an ambient columnist for Bandcamp Daily. He also works as a publicity assistant at Terrorbird Media. He also works with Fire Talk Records. He's written for Stereogum. He's written for Rolling Stone, NPR Music, Pitchfork, so many. And he also DJs under the alias DJ Stepdad. A lot of this upcoming conversation is about ambient music, which is a world I know nothing about. I learned so much in this conversation. And look, even if you're not an ambient music head, this might be a perfect place for you to jump in. As always, if you want to support us, you can do so at tapeclub.substack.com. All right, that's enough for me. Enjoy this conversation I had with Ted Davis. So I have Ted Davis here. Ted, okay, I mentioned this in the intro already, but I'm just going to tell you about you. Retail and D2C coordinator at Fire Talk, publicity assistant at Terrorbird, music editor for Merry-Go-Round, ambient columnist for Bandcamp Daily, also writes for Stereogum. Your work has appeared in Rolling Stone, NPR Music, Pitchfork, many more, and you also DJ under the alias DJ Stepdad. So where, out of all of those things, do you focus most of your energy these days? Because that is a lot of stuff to be doing.
Yeah, for sure. It's the freelance hustle. In New York, it's kind of endless. And I feel like you're always... the honest answer is I feel like my energy is evenly distributed. Yeah, that's definitely... there isn't really one hustle. And a lot of that... I'm at the office right now after work at Terrorbird, and I work in person at Fire Talk. A lot of the work goes down in person. So the honest truth is it's just kind of I'm really in it all the time. But I wouldn't say that there's anything that's getting phoned in. I think a lot of people probably know me as a music writer, but if anything these days, that's the first thing I've kind of had to draw a line with and be all right, I am going to do my best at the writing stuff I do, but I'm not going to try and publish 100 things a year. I'd say I'm closer to 50, which is still a lot, but that's probably the thing that I've focused the least energy on the last year and a half or so, since I've gone kind of all in on the music industry.
And so was being a music writer kind of a step into the music world for you? Did it help you open doors and get in with places like Fire Talk and Terrorbird?
Yeah, for sure. When I was, we're going to rehash a lot of what we're getting into before we start recording, but I lived in LA for a while and I was a radio promoter. And I was freelancing as a writer on the side for much smaller places. And would land the occasional, thing that paid a couple $100 at a publication that maybe people had heard of, or but a lot of what I was doing was for free and was doing it on the side of a day job in radio. And I very randomly, not really even through somebody I'm super close with or keep up with, but was offered. I've been writing about ambient music for I'd started writing for a site called Resident Advisor and had been doing some kind of just free ambient reviews, and honestly was just tweeting about ambient music a lot when I was probably 23. Kind of was a pivot from writing about indie rock, and got offered a column at Bandcamp from the person who used to write the column that I write now, who didn't really seem to love doing it that much anymore, and it was sort of mostly writing about emo and that sort of thing. And shortly after I moved to New York for just kind of, why does any 23-year-old move to New York? Kind of the hustle, get in the door, take things more seriously, but also I was dating somebody who lived here, and you can, I was in LA, you can't stay up all night partying. And I was in New York, you can, and which is funny because I don't really do that anymore. But at 24, it was I gotta do it. So it was a mix of that and writing being a thing that people started to know me for. And just life stuff. My best friends and my ex lived here, and that felt all enough of a reason to need to do it for a couple years.
And so you kind of jumped into New York and you managed to find some gigs that you could kind of cobble together, doing stuff with Terrorbird, doing stuff with Fire Talk. I'm sure you eventually noticed that it's quite a small world and maybe a lot of people know each other, and you are able to sort of parlay the quality of your work into relationships across the industry. That's at least how it is for me. And I've noticed in film, you edit a project for someone, you notice that they know that person, and that person will hire you for something else. similar-ish vibe in music, I guess?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm like a master of really long-winded answers, and I'm sorry if that happens.
You're
to
a
you, but
writer. You're a
basically,
writer. That's what it is. And you like ambient stuff. It's about the long form for you. You know?
Truly. When I moved to New York for a couple months, I was working at various coffee shops, and then I eventually, through Twitter, ambient music Twitter, my friend Patricia just like recommended me for a copywriting job outside of the music industry. And for like a little under a year, I had like kind of I was a contract copywriter for an air purifier company, which was actually a really great gig. And I sort of was moonlighting.
Technical writing, right? Is that what they call it?
And I had like a pretty solid, like, just kind of like monthly lump sum of non-music change. And then like eventually I got laid off as a copywriter does. And I spent a long time trying to break back in, and it just felt like a dying art form. And around the same time, I'd gotten just like through a former employee at Terrorbird, like had gotten kind of just was like, oh, we're hiring. And I was sort of like, I need a job, and this is like a dream company. I'd actually been saying I didn't want to go back into indie music full time, but was sort of like, you know, there's the copywriting thing isn't working, and like this would be one of the music companies I would go back for. And then in the classic nature of like freelance work in New York, I eventually needed like a side income, and I've been, you know, as one does in their early 20s, I was just talking to people who had cool label jobs or staff writer jobs or whatever, who were like in their late 30s, early 40s. And one of them, who was a former editor of mine at RA, who then went on to work at a cool label doing A&R. We'd gotten like dinner, and he told me that he was doing like freelance PR and like working at Amoeba and writing when he was around my age, and that had kind of gradually snowballed in his like early 30s. So I was kind of like, hey, you know, like trying to do some version of this. At the very least, it worked for someone else I know, and like I don't know anybody who was like, I was a technical writer and a music publicist and a music journalist, and that got me somewhere. But a record store job seemed like a better, more like in that mix side hustle.
Yeah. You're talking to people who are in that world or adjacent to that world daily, it seems, you know, it would seem like. Yeah,
for sure. And, you know, like, so my old, sorry, not my old boss, my current boss, Trevor, like, I'd interviewed him for a piece for Merry Go Round, like when I was right out of college, and I'd covered a couple Fire Talk bands for like NPR and places like that. And he just opened a record store, and I was just kind of like, hey man, like, you know, I don't even know if you remember me, but like I'm genuinely interested in record store work. And I got hired there one day a week, and then like two other people quit, and I was kind of like, all right, like, you also seem to like this more than the other people working here. Like you actually seem into selling records on a good day. And I was like, yes, I am. It's a very fun time. Love records.
I also feel like that's a job that's in high demand. Like, how can you get people who work there who don't want to do it? I feel like working in a record store is a pretty sweet job, you know? What was the store?
Oh, it's called Fire Talk Shop. So it's like the same, and basically doubles as an office for the label. It's in Greenpoint, so it's kind of where every label in New York is based. And just kind of being the one person who was like in the room at the literal office most days, it was kind of like, all right, like, well, I need somebody to do like, you know, just like physical distribution and like customer service shit and like all of this kind of like unsexy back end stuff for the label. And I was like, you know, like I have like creative gigs through music writing and Terrorbird doing like PR back end stuff. Like, hell yeah, I'll do like kind of nitty gritty label stuff. That sounds dope. I'm young. It's a great experience. And yeah, that kind of fell into place like about a year and a half ago. And I've kind of been doing a mix of all of the hustle now. Yeah, I'm not going to lie. Like it is totally a hustle. Like it's like a ton of work. One day I hope to just be like a dude with like one job and like a writing gig, but I also am somebody who sort of like refuses to go do that in another industry again.
Yeah, I feel you. It's, you know, what I find with creative stuff and freelancing, I mean, just my personal journey with it. I've ended up with one client who is awesome, and they're my main client, and I just do anything for them all the time whenever they need me. And that it's dangerous. I'm living on the edge, because if that one client goes away, I'm fucked. But at least I've got them. So it's funny that you bring up that, like, I think you mentioned that it's kind of it was an unassuming small office or whatever. My company, we had we do post-production. We had our tiny little office in Bushwick at one point. And I remember I had a friend who was working for a management company or something. And she was like, "Oh, we're in the same office." I was like, "Wait, what? Like, you're right there?" And I walked in, and there's just like two people sitting in a room. And I don't know. In my mind, I was picturing like, oh, they manage this big artist. They've got to have like this giant suite or whatever. It's like, no, it's just two people sitting in a room chilling. So it's less assuming than you think sometimes. Tell me a little bit about, so it says retail and D2C coordinator. What exactly is that?
Yeah, so literally like overseeing like a physical retail business in the shop. Like I'm essentially like a record store manager. And then just for the label, because Fire Talk was for those not familiar, is a record label and has been for 15 years. And like the store is much more of a new sort of like experiment / just like office space that is a cool place to buy records. And the D2C stuff is just like with our, horrible postal system in 2025, like a lot of people don't have records show up, or a lot of people will pre-order a record on Bandcamp and they're like, "It's been 2 months. What the hell?" And you're like, "Yeah, it's a pre-order. Like, you're going to get it in 3 months. Like, here's the small print. Like, I'm sorry. We'd be happy to refund you. But like, the pre-order means we don't have it. It literally doesn't exist. We're making it in the Czech Republic right now." And just kind of explaining that stuff to people. And then just like, honestly, just like mailing a ton of records, buying a ton of records through the store, through like distributors like Red Eye or Secretly or Forced Exposure, which like I didn't know anything about before I worked at a record store.
So that's interesting. That's kind of what I wanted to get to here. So through that experience and through your experience at Terrorbird, can you maybe walk a listener or a viewer who doesn't know what a record rollout is like? Can you walk them through maybe the whole process of like getting the record made and then eventually rolling it out and getting it out to listeners?
Yeah, I mean, so there's like a whole, to be clear, like I very rarely deal with like the contractual or legal side of things. And that's like a whole ass other side of the industry, and like any type of label job that like, don't get me wrong, I'm pretty interested, but just have never touched. So like if you're doing like a legit record, like there's like a whole like paperwork side of things that like I'm just not really an authority on. But like, yeah, I mean, in terms of my perspective, like I mostly know about like music promo, PR, and then just like literally getting records made. I mean, like in terms of getting a record produced, we go through a company called like A to Z Vinyl in the Czech Republic.
I actually reached out to them to see if someone from there wanted to come on the show at some point, but we're waiting on a response. I think that would be a cool perspective, right? To see, I don't know, like no one knows about that kind of stuff.
Totally.
So you guys go to A to Z, or someone goes to A to Z to get.
Yeah.
The
So my
made.
boss, like, kind of is the sort of the guy who coordinates all of that with them directly. But like, basically they make the records. A lot of the time it takes longer than expected. I'm often the person who like will listen to a test pressing and be like, "All right, songs played, they were in order. Like, this is good to go." They'll send in like, a couple months after we send in the music, like the test pressing is literally just in like a white sleeve, like unmarked record. Once they get the go ahead, like they handle basically like pressing vinyl and doing all the album art that we send them and stuff.
What happens to the test pressings? Do you guys hold on to them somewhere? And they're
sometimes
like
we sell them on
trove?
Bandcamp, on like Bandcamp Friday, as like sort of like a collector's item. We hang on to some of them. I'd say the sleeve of test pressings usually has like 5 to 10 in it. A couple go to the band, the manager, whatever. So like,
I feel like they can be cherished little like items, I assume,
Yeah, for sure. I would say like the demand for actually buying them is not always like through the roof. Like it's definitely like the real heads who buy them. And it definitely, I think, depends on like the caliber of the band that's actually going to like sell a $50 test pressing. But like we hang on to all of them and like, yeah, either sell them or just kind of keep them around. And yeah.
So that speaks a little bit to the creation of the album. Tell me a bit about like the album rollout part of it. After everything's all said and done, we know that the album's coming out. How, like, I guess the promo side of it, right? Like, how far out do you plan stuff, and what goes into that planning?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it really seems to be something that kind of depends on the artist. Like at Terrorbird, we'll have artists who start promoting a campaign. You know, we lock it in like 8 months in advance and have everything ready to go like 3 months in advance. And then I'm working on, you know, kind of final quarter of the year projects right now that are like coming in, and like essentially we're like hitting the ground running 2 days after we like get the MP3s that we upload for the, you know, promo that we send to writers. So that really depends. I mean, if somebody were like, how early should I start sending my record around, Ted? I'd be like, you should definitely do it like, you know, 8 to 10 weeks in advance, like, you know, sending it to relevant writers. Cause you should definitely expect that people won't get back to you with any type of news either way until like 2 weeks out. So the longer you have to gestate and kind of gently nudge over the course of like 2.5 months, like if you're going to get me solid press, that's like the perfect timeline. There's PR companies that start promoting stuff 6 months in advance. And if I get something like that as a writer, I usually am candidly like, this seems great. Please follow up with me 4 weeks before it's out. Like, you're way too early here. I don't know who knows what I'll be doing in 6 months.
Yeah, that's a great point. Like there's no one size fits all option for promo. It sort of depends on the writers. It depends on the bands. It depends on what their goals are, where they're trying to, you know, get covered and stuff like that. One thing that I think it was a pretty popular thing to do a few years ago was just release singles and not release albums. I personally think that that's kind of whack, but like, is there like a best practice in your opinion in terms of like, you know, releasing singles, like one single a month and making a shitload of TikToks about it? Or is it all kind of blah at this point?
That's a good question. I mean, I can tell you from a press perspective, if you're just releasing a single with no album attached, you're never going to get a write-up. There's no, like, Pitchfork, like, has a track review section, but they, like, use it once every 4 months, you know? Like, it's not really going to, like, there aren't really that many avenues anymore. Resident Advisor used to do a lot of single reviews, and I'd write a lot of them. NPR used to have Now Playing, which did track reviews. I used to write there a bunch. Pitchfork's, you know, track review section used to cover all sorts of cool small shit that I was like super stoked on, and they kind of like really downsized the scale of their coverage. They did that in the album review section too. So from like a press perspective, I don't think releasing a ton of singles is wise by any means. There should definitely be an album attached. I think I love a label called 8093, and I've noticed one thing that they do for a lot of their artists, like far in advance, sometimes like a year, is just drop 2 tracks from an album with like no mention of the album. And like, I think that's really cool because eventually when the record, they did that with like the James K record that is kind of blowing up right now. And like everybody had heard like, you know, 2 of the tracks on the record before it was announced. And I think it builds like a level of familiarity. But and those tracks streamed well because like 8093, popular label, James K, it's been around forever, great record, poised for success. And then I also assume that 8093 has a pretty legit digital distro deal, which means that their stuff has like a much higher chance of getting kind of immediately pushed onto editorial playlists than like somebody going through a distributor like Symphonic or like DistroKid.
Well, what exactly is the difference between different distributors? Because that's a world where I don't know anything. I just make music, give it to my friend, and he uploads it somewhere on the internet. But
yeah, great question.
What's the difference between them? Yeah.
I mean, so yeah, there's just like infinite options. Pretty much anybody can release music, but going through a label that has like a deal with like a company that has direct like relationships with the anonymous curators at these places, like you just have a much higher chance of those people actually like listening to what's getting pushed to them. So the big ones would be like, would be Red Eye, who are like a partner in Fire Talk. They do like physical distribution, like getting vinyl records in stores, but then they also like, if you're using them for digital distribution, like your band is probably going to get on 3 big Spotify playlists and, get like some actually meaningful number of streams. Whereas like if you're using something kind of that like is less gatekept, like a DistroKid that just lets you get your stuff out, like it can still happen, but it's far less likely to just be like, nobody's sending the like sampler of releases coming out this Friday to like the Spotify curator who like nobody outside of these digital distribution companies really knows who those people are. So it's a great way to kind of like cut the line.
It's almost like a signal to noise ratio type thing where with DistroKid, you're just getting, there's a ton of stuff getting on there. The barrier to entry is super low, and maybe the other ones are a bit more curated. Is what it sounds like.
Yeah, for sure. And like, they're also hard to get in with. And like most of the time, if you're going to get in with them, that's going to be through your record label. So I think, it comes down to like, if you're an artist, like looking for and praying that a record label that has that type of great digital distro deal is going to like pull through for you. With that said, I think a lot of labels also start without one. Like, it's kind of like if you look at the labels represented by like a Secretly Distro or a Red Eye, it is like kind of the legendary indie labels. It's not like your favorite tape label. They're probably just using like the same digital distro platform you are. And like, there's nothing wrong with that. And like, if they are able to kind of like level up, like the odds of them having that fall into place are going to happen more organically after they've just been crushing it and building a cool thing for a couple of years than they are to just happen off of like a submission form.
I was going to say that makes sense. And it's funny. I've said a lot over the last like couple years that like labels don't really matter anymore. And like people can go out and just make their own stuff and champion themselves. But from what you're telling me, I'm like, damn, I should be rethinking that whole idea. I shouldn't be parroting that anymore, because it seems like labels really kind of can make a difference.
A good one for sure. One that has relationships with like,
the right distributors and all that.
That can be a way to get your record in. It's crazy. Like to go into, I travel a lot, and like I can go into any, respectable record store in pretty much any city, and they will have like the same Fire Talk records I'm going to go home and mail. And that's all because we use Red Eye, who are like great at marketing to record stores and are also great at getting shit on playlists that like matter. I would say if you're like, you don't have the option to sign to a label like that, which like the average artist, especially early on, does not, then it kind of doesn't matter. Like if you're choosing between like a tape label and like releasing music on your own, I think the real question is just like, if I want tapes for this, am I going to be annoyed if I have to make them myself, or is it nice to have somebody else pay for these for me? But like, I'm probably not going to make money off of my like cassette run of an ambient record. So like, there's no right or wrong answer. Like, you're probably still going to have your day job, and it just comes down to how much control you want. But if like, a legit label that has kind of like infrastructure comes knocking and is like, you should do your record with us, like you should do your record with them for sure.
Hell yeah, that's great advice, and also a great segue. So we're talking about labels, tape labels, and I think I'd mentioned that where I first discovered your writing was on a thing called the Tape Label Report, which is something that Bandcamp does. So can you tell me a little bit about how you discover these tape labels? Because those are not by any means gigantic labels. There's a lot of smaller DIY stuff on there. So how do you kind of stay in the loop with new labels you're finding?
Yeah, for sure. Well, first and foremost, in spite of me just saying that you shouldn't, you don't have to work with a tape label. I would even say prefer those types of like small DIY labels. I think there's like a much more, I just find them more fun to follow because there's often a lot of music, and it's often like either somebody you know putting out music or somebody you've just like legitimately never heard of who's probably doing something kind of cool. How do I discover the labels? I mean, for that series, half the time it's a label I've been following for a minute who I know makes tapes. That's like the biggest prerequisite for that. And then half the time it's Bandcamp coming to me and saying like, hey, there's this cool record out of this place or this place. Like, do you want to do it? And I'm always like, sure, I like money and I like uplifting small labels. Like, yes, let's period. And then I check it out and I go through. And
how many do you have to pick from? Usually, like, are there, because it's not just a strictly like American sensation, like DIY pressing tapes. I imagine it's a pretty global thing.
For sure.
Like what are some of the more out there, submissions you've seen or tapes you've gotten?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think like, well, on a broader level, the way I find music to write about for Bandcamp and my ambient column there is just I follow probably 300 to 500 labels at any given moment in like the dance music and ambient space. And I just like keep a big ass spreadsheet every month and just like, if something falls within the date range for the column, I'm like, great, like cool. I'll listen to it this month and see if it calls my name. How I actually find the labels and where they're from, I have no idea how I find the labels. A lot of it just comes down to like literally just listening to everything, getting started, following 10 labels, following those same pretty niche artists, seeing where they're putting stuff out. And then just kind of following those places on Bandcamp. And like a lot of small labels stop after a while. I often find myself unfollowing stuff that's been inactive or like announced that it's done. Sometimes a label will approach me because, you can dig up my email if you want on the internet. I'm easy to find, or, shoot me a DM. And like, a lot of the time it doesn't call my name, but sometimes I'm like, yeah, this is actually really sick. Like I will follow this. I will write about this. And like, I'm like, hell yeah, I'm so glad this new label reached out or whatever.
I mean, that makes sense. It's also like a case of knowing your audience, right? You write about ambient stuff a lot. So if you have an ambient tape label, you're kind of the guy, like send it over. Don't send, don't send not that, your chances are lower if you send something that the writer's not historically interested in. One last quick question before we get to our first break. So I had a lot of questions here about ambient music. I think we're going to probably get to them in the mixtape, I'm assuming. But if you had to give someone who doesn't know a damn thing like me about ambient music a jumping off point, is there a certain artist or album that you would recommend as a, dipping your toe into the pool of ambient music?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. So like first and foremost, I don't think that I really like came into the world being like ambient music's the thing I'm going to learn a lot about and be really into. Like I kind of stumbled into being really into it just through being like a huge music listener in college. And I didn't like a lot of the ambient music I heard at first, but I think the record that won me over would be this record, Chill Out by the KLF, who are like a British duo. You know what? Double check me on them being British. They're definitely from somewhere in that zone. But
yes, it says Liverpool and London, but it says one of the musicians is Scottish.
Yeah, so that's what I thought. But it's definitely over in that part of the world. But it's just kind of music for like kind of tailor-made for like come down rave moments, like the chill out room, and like it's a lot of slide guitars and like train noises, and like I like that record's not like, it's also kind of designed specifically for people who are like coming off of a bunch of like drugs at raves in the 90s, which like I in spite of the music I listen to, I genuinely don't do drugs, but that to me felt a little bit more appealing than like the idea of like, here's Brian Eno making beautiful music, when you're kind of like, it's true. It is beautiful. Like this guy is an undeniable legend, but like beyond that, like, I come from like playing in like punk bands, and I was kind of like, oh, like this feels gritty in a way that the music I came up really, excited about felt kind of gritty. So that was the one where I was like, actually, ambient music has kind of a badass vibe that I wouldn't have pegged on first like soundscape. So that one for me is a cool one for sure.
That's probably where I will start my ambient journey then. As soon as you said like slide guitars and train whistles and stuff, I was like, all right, I'm in. I'll give it a shot. We'll see what this is.
So
like.
One thing I'll say, like building on that, is like I know a lot of people, I think a lot more people probably read the ambient column than I realized at first. And I know there are people who disagree with what I put in there and think it's like not ambient or whatever. And like I'll totally cop to the fact that like the like endless soundscape vibe to me is just like really boring. And for me, that doesn't really fit my definition of what ambient music is. And I think for me, like the KLF or even like Aphex Twin's, like, the selected ambient work stuff that has like drums on it, but is like definitely not dance music. Like that for me is where ambient, like the, kind of ambient music lives, is just like wordless mood setting, kind of like non-propulsive atmospheric music. And like, I think the KLF does a really good job of kind of showing what that means better than like just kind of like a big drone.
Yeah, and I mean that's a great point. One of my notes here I wrote is ambient music is it has a pretty distinct slice of listenership. The music's nuanced, and that makes it hard for a lot of folks to grasp, because there's not like it's not an easy thing to discuss, like you can kind of discuss pop music and like rock music pretty easily. With ambient, like a lot of people just lack the vocabulary to even describe what's happening in these songs and why they sound the way they do. So it is, it is a whole world. Let's do this. Let's take a quick break. And then when we get back, we're going to talk about your mixtape, and maybe we'll delve further into the ambient sound. We are back with everyone's favorite portion of the show, the mixtape. And so Ted, your mixtape, I got to say, this is one where I had not heard a single one of these artists. I had not heard a single second of any of this. Normally I've heard like at least one thing. I think the only other one we've had where I hadn't heard a single second was episode 5 of the first season. Michael Kelly, he put in he made what he called a Think Boy thesis mixtape. And it was like a bunch of stuff that I was like, I love this. Never heard any of it. So same here. Tell me a bit about any themes or any things that you kind of were thinking about as you put this together.
No, it's just kind of stuff that I know that I like reliably listen to, and I'm like, this is really good, and I've felt that way for like over a year. Just kind of stuff that I DJ or stuff that I just am like, when I want like thought-provoking music on my walks, like, I listen to, I feel like, infinite albums, and these are tracks I come back to that like fall in my wheelhouse as a writer. There is definitely an alternate mixtape where I include what I'm actually listening to these days, and it's like a bunch of just like the worst music ever, like Audio Slave. But
hell yeah,
because I definitely have been like, it's been a rocker year. I think I've kind of hit a wall with the esoteric electronic music a little bit. I've been doing it for years, and like, I'm a drummer.
Maybe what we can do is a little bit down the line, we can get you back in, and then you'll have a different tape that we can kind of compare to this one, how different they are.
We can do the exact opposite, which is like 2000s radio metal. But
hey, I'm here for it. I figured
I'd give you the ambient columnist kind of vibe, and not the like me at the gym before my workday starts.
Look, I'm putting a pin in it. We're gonna do the gym 2000s rock playlist at some point. Let's get into it. So your first track that you picked is the band pronounced, the artist pronounced Gigi? Is that how you'd say it? And then
probably.
Montjuïc.
So some of these I don't even, never have said them out loud. Yeah.
So the song is Montjuïc, the band is Gigi, or the artist is Gigi. Tell me a bit about why you picked this song, and just a bit about the artist, or how you found them, or anything really that struck you about this one.
Yeah, for sure. Gigi is this artist on a couple labels, but the record I really like that they made is on a label called Quiet Time, who aren't really that active anymore, but are a really good like New York ambient label. If you're looking for ambient that I feel like kind of pushes back on like the boring vibes, it's definitely a good place to start. Yeah, this track is cool. It's just like a bunch of, kind of like deep pads and like a really creepy ASMR talking voice. Not even necessarily creepy, but like relaxing in sort of an eerie way.
It was saying stuff about like it was like a meditation or relaxation type thing, wasn't it? Sort of.
Yeah, and I'm just kind of like, yeah, I think it's named after like a big kind of hill and neighborhood in Barcelona.
Montjuïc is exactly that, a hill in a neighborhood in Barcelona. I remember I used to go to there's a tech conference in Barcelona every year, and I used to work that a while ago, and I every time I was there, I'd go play soccer at Montjuïc because there was some fields where you could pay a couple euros, you jump in the game, and so much fun. But that's what I was like, oh, this is crazy. I know one thing from this playlist. I know that reference.
Yeah, I was in Barcelona for the first time earlier this year, and I'd already been jamming this song for a while, but I feel like I loved that neighborhood. It's really beautiful and relaxing and surreal. So kind of having that added context had me kind of go back to this track that I already really liked for a while. But I mean, it's definitely also like if you're DJing at, in a loft at 2 a.m. and there's 5 people there and it's kind of like tripped out and mellow. It's like a pretty elite song to throw on kind of as like the party's winding down. Just kind of good ASMR soundscape vibes.
Amazing. Let's listen to a little bit of it. Here is Montjuïc by Gigi.
Water in your body, you could walk really deep. Grow like you.
Next up is a song called Rounded by Perko. This one, I think, I'm just looking at this. I don't want to tip it too much here, but of the 6, I think like there was definitely ones that I gravitated towards more. This was one of them. The faster ones is the ones I gravitated towards more. But tell me a bit about Rounded and about Perko.
Yeah, so Perko is an artist named Fergus Jones who's kind of popped off. He released like an eponymous record last year, just as Fergus Jones, and it's a really good record, but I'd been a fan of his for a while, kind of his clubbier music, and this is from super early era, like he just sort of before kind of getting in with like the Pitchfork critical Darling Universe, was just sort of like a Copenhagen-based like dance producer, and I don't know, I think like he has a really unique ear for like kind of mellow but like gnarly sound design. It's definitely, the music I make doesn't really land in this vein, but I wish it did. And I like this track. It's really simple, but it's also like super percussive and like driving. That's why I keep coming back to it as just like a DJ or just like somebody when I'm like listening to music, trying to figure out like what I want to turn to for inspiration when I next go to make music. This is definitely pretty high on that list.
I think one thing that's really interesting to me is that you mentioned you're a drummer, and a lot of people would think about ambient music as just, again, something you mentioned earlier, as soundscapes. That's not really how you're defining it, obviously, as we go through this, there's a lot of really percussive elements going on throughout this tape. So I think it's just an interesting connection to me, that a drummer and ambient music, because you wouldn't think it, but it is the truth. Have you seen Perko or Fergus Jones play in person, or been?
No, I almost did over the last weekend because it was a music festival in Philly, but I had to leave a little bit early for work in Brooklyn the next day. He was playing super late, so I'm sure the paths will cross. Weirdly, he came into my my work the day before, like just kind of very randomly, and I didn't know the man and was probably a bit over familiar, but we'd followed each other and I'd written about his music, and it was kind of like a nice surprise to have an artist I like come into my record store job on a quiet Thursday.
That's amazing. Well, hopefully you'll get to see him play at some point. Let's listen to a little bit of Rounded by Perko. Next up, the song is called Mercury. The artist is Hashman DJ. So tell me a bit about how you first heard this song or what struck you about this one.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, I was kind of just struck by what a kind of weird and absurd DJ moniker Hashman DJ is, while also being kind of a cool one. But this is, yeah, eventually kind of backtracked and realized this record is very much like kind of a cult classic, like sort of ambient house record. It's on a label that I was kind of popping off when I was in high school in the DC area, but I missed it because I was like a punk kid, called Future Times, who are pretty legendary, like DC, like dance label. And yeah, I mean, in terms of, I don't know really that much about Hashman DJ. I think he's from like the Pacific Northwest, which is cool. And yeah, in terms of what struck me about it, I don't know. Like, it's just like a little gritty, a little dreamy. I feel like that's a nice balance I like when I'm like looking for a track to DJ. And it's definitely like this one and the whole record, it's on Sandopolis. I've just kind of stayed on repeat, but it's definitely like over 10 years old at this point, like not like new music by any means, but yeah, just kind of really good, like lo-fi sort of dreamy house music in a way that stuck with me.
So for all of these selections that you've made, I assume these are all part of your that you go to them in certain situations and you'll play these songs when you're DJing, I imagine, right?
Yeah, for sure. And like, I think, you know, the DJ stuff I do for me isn't really part of like my job or anything. It's mostly just like fun sounds kind of like a little too goofy at this point for as ridiculous as the moniker is, I definitely put a lot of like work into that, but it's definitely like kind of become like a real, you know, sort of outlet for me in a way that like being in a band always did. And like, yeah, all of these tracks, I would say, like whether it's a dancier set or a chiller one, is music that I'll play. Yeah, but like the Hashman DJ stuff is really good for, I feel like, sort of like a middle of the road. Like you're not playing like some DIY ambient loft thing, but you're also not playing like a club at, you know, 2:30 in the morning. It definitely scratches that like nice, like chill, but not ambient, not too chill kind of itch.
Amazing. Well, let's listen to a little bit of it. Here is Mercury by Hashman DJ. Next up, the artist is Ulla, Ulla. The song is Gloss. I loved this one. This one's all like choppy and frantic and crazy. I loved this one. Tell me a bit about Ulla and a bit about Gloss.
Yeah, that track rules. I love it. Yeah, she's kind of a mysterious, like, I mean, yeah, not a lot of people know a lot about her, but I'd definitely say if you're following like kind of the new like vanguard of ambient music, she's also like in the last 10 years, somebody who's kind of quietly become a legend. Yeah, has put out a lot of records on labels I like. There's a label called Motion Ward, who are really good, like sort of like ambient label with roots in club music, which is definitely like where I get excited. This record's on a label called 3XL that I like a lot. That is sort of a similar vibe. Like all these labels are kind of in the same little universe. But in terms of why I like the track, it's just cool. Like I love anything that chops up like a wordless vocal and makes it sound really psychedelic and trippy and dreamy. And this is like some of the best of that I've ever heard. So I feel like I come back to it a lot.
Yeah, you mentioned that she quietly became a legend. Why that choice of words? What made her legendary, I guess?
I just feel like a lot more people I meet who are like, I'm into ambient music. And I'm like, have you heard this artist? Like 100% of them are like, oh yeah, I love her music. Like nobody's like, oh no, tell me about her. Like, it's like, I feel like if you've followed ambient music over the last, like maybe, you know, 5 to 10 years, like she's definitely sort of like one of the first artists you're going to hear about. So Yeah, just an artist. I feel like I don't have to like explain to people. They already are like familiar and have like listened to stuff and are hyped on it. Which is like not that common in ambient music. It's like I'm always surprised when somebody in a such an anonymous and like niche space like eventually kind of finds like a real like yeah, kind of an audience that isn't just online. And I feel like there's been a lot of like real world crossover for me with like Ulla.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, again, it is like what I mentioned earlier. It's a very distinct slice of listenership. So it must be cool to watch someone rise through the ranks and really hit people. Let's listen to a little bit of it. Here's Gloss by Ulla. Next up, I don't know how to say this one. Evan Tuell or Even Tuell?
I also don't know how to say this artist's name. This not an artist I really know anything about.
So the song you picked is called Untitled A1. When I looked them up, there was a lot of Untitled's. There was Entitled A1,
mostly
B1.
Untitled's from this dude. Yeah.
And I think the main sample is someone going Detroit or something like that, or they
Definitely
keep saying Detroit.
Saying Detroit, yeah.
So explain to me why you picked this one and how you found it and all that.
Yeah, I don't know anything about this dude, but he's on a label called like Workshop that this artist Low Tech runs, and it's just one of the best house labels, period. And if you like kind of like refined vibes from your dance music, like nothing gets out of hand. Yeah, not a lot happens, but it's just good, simple, kind of minimal, like groove based dance music.
Do you remember the first time you heard this one?
Yeah, it was probably through, honestly, I hate to say it, but just like a weird Spotify algorithm. But I feel like it kind of kept popping up with like sort of 2000s house projects I was digging into, and I was like, yeah, this is cool, this is great. And then I just feel like it's probably the track I've played the most as a DJ throughout the year. Just I feel like it slipped into a lot of stuff. So
I mean, that Detroit kind of sample, it grabs you. It makes you look up and go like, wait, what was that? Detroit is very iconic and relevant in house music, right? I mean, from what I know so little about any like electronic genre, but Detroit house is a term I've heard before.
Yeah, it's there in Chicago are kind of the birthplaces of like house and techno. I don't know if this dude is from either of those places. Like, definitely not an artist I can speak with any real conviction about, and I'll totally own that. But
from what I see here online, I think it says he is located in Germany. So maybe it's
sounds
just
about right.
An homage to Detroit.
Yeah, Workshop is a German label. But I ran through like most of their back catalog earlier this year, in addition to like the founder Low Tech's catalog, and it's really like stunningly good house music, if that's your thing. It's super simple, but it's just like there kind of isn't really a dud track. And this is definitely probably the track from that label I'm the most excited about. Definitely an older label for the most part. Their heyday was kind of like the like late 2000s. So,
well, it's the gift that keeps on giving. Let's listen to a little bit of it. Here is Evan Tuell with Untitled A1.
Detroit.
And then finally, closing out your mixtape, DJ Birdbath with Kitsch Memory. I also loved this one. Like I mentioned earlier, I liked the ones who had a higher BPM going on and were like more frantic. And if I recall correctly, the DJ Birdbath one was a little faster. But tell me about why you picked this one as the closer, and also tell me about how you feel about DJ Birdbath.
So once again, like kind of not an artist I know like a ton about, but I love the label that this is on. I think that's kind of the uniting factor for a lot of these tracks, is just like, you know, a lot of electronic artists remain fairly anonymous, or just, you know, aren't really trying to be personalities. And the context of a record label provides kind of most of what you need to know, and kind of foregrounds your expectations a bit if it's a good label. This is on a label called Theory Therapy, and I've done like a mix for their mix series. I think they're just a really good, like, I don't know, just kind of ambient club type sort of label. This track is cool because it's like kind of built on like a break beat and a really nice sort of like hyper voice sample. And that for me is just kind of like where my ideal sort of ambient world is not, is like, it's kind of hyper, it's kind of glitchy. There are like, there's a lot of motion and yeah, this track I think kind of like cascades and like kind of really builds to a lot of stuff while also like starting and ending pretty mellow and trippy and like kind of euphoric. So I think I've played this one in a lot of my DJ sets over the last year too, which is why it stood out and is just like a nice, like kind of mesmerizing, like, yeah, it's like simultaneously like a great vibe, but definitely not just like vibes music, which is kind of like never a good vibe with ambient stuff when it's.
I mean, it's also beyond musically what it is. It's a great name for a DJ Birdbath, and it's a great name for a song, Kitsch Memory. Let's listen to a little bit of it because it is quite a great track to close with. DJ Birdbath, Kitsch Memory. And there we go, Ted. That's it. That is your mixtape. 6 songs that were brand new to me. And it seems like after we've gone through it, the uniting factor was kind of the importance of labels is like where we're landing at the end of all these segments, you know?
For sure. I think, yeah, like with like electronic or ambient music in particular, if you're going to get into it, like the first thing you can do is just kind of find some labels you like and like you can maybe backtrack and figure out what makes certain artists exciting, but like labels are definitely the best place to find like otherwise pretty like faceless figures in music. I think it's a little bit different in indie rock where like a band's story is always going to be kind of like a narrative that maybe hooks you and provides context to the music, but when you're looking for instrumental music, it's more of like comes down to just like, do I like where this takes me than like, do I like where it's coming from? So getting into labels is definitely, I think, the best way to go deep if you're looking to get into dance music or ambient music. Like anything else is going to be, I think, just kind of like when you get into like the label side of things, it sort of starts to give it all a lot of context and like helps you find where to start and like also where to finish looking. Whereas if you're just kind of going through like random algorithms or whatever, like too much going on, it's a hard world to parse.
Yeah, I can. And you know what? I don't, like I said earlier, I am such a beginner in all of this. So for me, this was a beautiful little journey through all of it. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to blind rank some classic albums, and then we'll get the hell out of here. All right, we're back, and as I mentioned, we are blind ranking some classic ambient albums. I'm kicking myself because I wish I had just done blind ranking classic labels. That would have been the perfect thing to do. We'll have to do that next time you come on. All right, so here's how this is going to work, Ted. I'm going to name, I've got 10 of them that I pulled from my research. I'm going to name an album, and you kind of give it a slot 1 through 10, and I'll keep you informed on where you are if you ever get lost along the way. So here we go. First album, Tangerine Dream, their album Phaedra. Where are you putting this? 1 through 10.
How am I? What is my 1 through 10?
Yeah, 1 through 10.
So I like Tangerine Dream, and I know that album. I'm gonna give that one like a 6. I'm not the biggest Tangerine Dream fan. It's kind of a little like too like synthy, like 80s is like, you know, like I feel like it's kind of like a little intense, but like it's almost like for me, that band has always been like, it's like industrial music, but there's no drums, but it's like industrial synth vibes. And that's like kind of not what I gravitate towards. So
so you're giving them a strong 6. They're right there locked in.
A strong 6 though, for sure. And like, if you're like, oh, should I listen to this? Definitely go listen to it.
Yeah, what makes this exercise so fun is that you don't know what's coming next. So you got to kind of hedge your bets. Next up, Boards of Canada with Music Has the Right to Children.
I'm going to go ahead and give this one like a solid 8. Sell a lot of copies of this one at the record store where I work. Boards of Canada, much bigger than I realized they were in terms of like having like a real world audience.
Of this list that I made, they were one of the few that I like knew. And also, I guess I'll give the caveat real quick here that, again, I'm such a beginner at this that I assume all of these that I picked are ambient. So if one doesn't fit the description, whatever that means, please call me on my bullshit.
As long as I've heard it, I'll rank it. But yeah, I like Boards of Canada. I found them in high school, so they were one of my first like artists like this. Didn't really like them when I first heard them, and I've definitely they've aged well for me. So we're gonna go ahead and throw an 8 on that one.
All right, so a solid 8. And to be clear, 1 is the best in this instance.
Oh wait, really? Oh shit! Backtrack. All right, so that one.
So Boards of Canada, you're putting them at 3. I'm guessing there.
Yeah, I'm giving them a 3.
Yeah, to recap it for me real quick.
Tangerine Dream, we're giving a 5. Like it, don't love it. Boards of Canada, we are giving a 3. I do like this, and I think you should listen to it.
Okay. Yes. That's my mistake. So 1 is the top, 10 is the bottom. Not that there's any bottom in these, because these are all incredible albums. All right. So
music's always great.
Yes.
That's the caveat. Gotta love it.
Coming in 3rd right now, Boards of Canada. 5th, Tangerine Dream. Where is this one going to go? This is Hiroshi Yoshimura with Music for 9 Postcards.
I'm going to give that a 1. That's a classic. That's a great one.
Wow, so that takes your top spot right there.
I think that one's deserving of the top spot. Definitely one of those records where I heard it and was like, this is awesome. I'm going to get deeper into this. I feel really inspired by music right now. Just real pretty beautiful music that I'm going to have to extremely recommend. That's a perfect record for sure.
I think you have a very interesting strategy going into this, because at this point, the only top ones that remain are the 2nd slot and the 4th slot. Everything else is basically going to be, you're filling out the bottom of your 10 here. Look, it's your strategy, not mine.
If we can flip-flop things retrospectively, or, I'm going in blind. So there's always a... Music for 9 Postcards is a great album, though. That's definitely if you're gonna listen to one ambient record, that's a noble choice. And it's super accessible too. It's not pretentious. It's just beautiful music. I think that's a fair top spot.
I cannot wait until we get a little bit later into this, and you'll be kicking yourself. I think maybe not.
All right.
Next up, we got Grouper with AIA Alien Observer.
So I'm going to go ahead and put that, if it's not too late, in the 2nd spot. I'm a big Grouper fan. I think keep it underneath Music for 9 Postcards, though, because it's definitely darker music. I think if we're trying to get people into this genre who might not know it, it's definitely more of a gateway into dark ambient, which I didn't really love at first, but I've always loved Grouper. Definitely an artist who kind of lands in that intersection of shoegaze and ambient music, which I think is an important thing to tap into for a lot of people who might be looking for, I don't know,
an entry point.
Yeah, Grouper's a great entry point, and her music has aged great. So love Grouper. We're gonna if it's not too late to put that at the number 2 spot.
Yeah,
I think
that number 2 was open, so Grouper's at number 2. So
great spot for Grouper.
Right now, the only top 5 spot you have open is 4. Everything else is going to be in the bottom 5, and we're about to move on to some heavy hitters.
All right.
Next up, Brian Eno, Apollo.
Okay, so I'm going to be honest, that one's going towards the bottom for me. I think I was a huge Brian Eno person. I think Brian Eno's music is great, but I don't come back to his music very much, if I'm being totally candid. Anybody getting into ambient music needs to run through the classics, period, and you're going to love them. But the deeper I've gotten, the more I actually he invented the genre, but the deeper I've gotten into it, the more I actually like albums that kind of push back against what he invented. So if we're going personal preference, I'm not going to put it at the bottom. What's left to have open?
You have 4, and then 6 through 10 are all open.
I'm going to put that one at 7.
7. All right, 7 for Brian Eno, Apollo.
I think people think I'm going to be a big Brian Eno guy, and I at certain points was, but not so much in my firmly in adulthood.
Okay, here we go. We're going on a run of albums that I think this is where I think you're going to start kicking yourself for using up your top spots. You can't change shit around either.
All
right.
Yeah. Well, no disrespect to any of these artists who might be listening. I know Grouper is listening to all of my podcast appearances.
Well, I know these next guys are definitely listening. The KLF with Chill Out.
We're going to have to go at 4 because that's the one that I threw out there. Not much left to say on that record, but it's dope. With that said, even though I said that was a great gateway, like I think 4, what's at number 3 above this one?
3, you got Boards of Canada. 2, you got Grouper, and 1, you got Hiroshi Yoshimura.
I think if I wasn't locked into the structure, I would probably I would recommend this one over Boards of Canada, but I don't know that I'd necessarily recommend it as like a first ambient record ever over Grouper Music for 9 Postcards. So not totally off, but dope record, super beautiful music, love the story, kind of a grittier record. We already got into it, but definite classic.
All right, we got 4 more left, and your spots that you have left are 6 and then 8, 9, 10. So next up, William Basinski, The Disintegration Loops.
Man, okay. All of these are great records. I'm probably gonna have to put this one at like 8. It's kind of a tough one to parse at first. I am a big William Basinski fan. I also think that when I was getting into ambient music, I remember listening through all of the Disintegration Loops, and like they didn't really. It took a couple times for me to be like, hell yeah, they're really long records and they're kind of challenging, but at the same, and I think genuinely, I think if you're going to get into William Basinski, even though it's not the one that people talk about the most, you should definitely start with the record Melancholia. That record's super accessible and beautiful, and that would be like absolutely my go-to Basinski. And then frankly, like his last couple records, like Lamentations and I think that On Reflection, both of those are from the last couple years. Super good, super beautiful, super accessible. And then like the Disintegration Loop stuff is definitely worth listening to, but it's super like deep and long, and like you're probably not going to sit down and like jam them on repeat for the rest of your life. They're probably more going to be records you check out.
All right. So you're comfortable with it being at 8.
Yeah, for sure. With that said, like big love to William Basinski, and still giving his, in the scope of ambient music, he's getting a 10, his catalog as a whole. So great.
Okay, so the spots that are left are 6, 9, and 10. So the 2 bottom feeders and then a middle of the road one at 6. But again, like you said, these are all great things. Aphex Twin, Selected Ambient Works, Volume 2.
I'm going to probably put this at like 9, and I will probably kick myself for that because we got some real classics. All of these are great records. I don't know. All of this stuff is good. I prefer the first Selected Ambient Works. It's a lot more drum driven. If this is Volume 2, right?
Yes, this is Volume 2.
Volume 2 is definitely the more like ambient of the two, but I think that's why I don't like it as much. If it was the first one, that's like an essential ambient listen. I think that's one that's going to like kind of speaks to the ways that the genre is a lot more like malleable than people give it credit for. Selected Ambient Works Volume 2 is like deep drones. I think for every like banging track, there's one that's kind of like off-putting and a little bit like boring. But if you look at what, his like techniques and like, all of his shit as a producer, real interesting record, but listening to it without context, not necessarily going to be the most enjoyable experience.
All right, that one's there at 9. Your next 2 spots you have, the last 2 spots you have available are spot 6 and spot 10. The next album, Bibio, Phantom Brickworks.
I'm going to put this in the 10 spot. No disrespect to Bibio. Just not an artist I feel like I listen to as much as any of these other artists. But yeah, that's probably, like, I know I've listened to a lot of his records, and the one that I really like by him is like Ambivalence Avenue. I remember that being a big one for me.
Yeah, Bibio was one of the few artists of this that I was familiar with. I think the song that really was like Bewley on Grey or something like that was one I really liked. But yeah, shout out Bibio. You deserve the 10 spot. It's you're surrounded by some of the greats. So
yeah, that's the thing. I'm not sure if you were like, where do I start? This would be one that I'd pull. But we got love, It's a loving 10.
So the last spot that's left is spot 6, and the album is 9 Inch Nails Quake.
Yeah, I'm down for that. I'm definitely down for that. I just saw 9 Inch Nails live earlier this summer. It was badass. I definitely prefer the heavier 9 Inch Nails stuff. I'm not gonna lie.
I've got to say, I think I'm eating my words here. I'm eating crow because I said you were going to be kicking yourself, but you seem like you kind of are okay with where things ended up. Let me run back through it.
I think this. I'm feeling fine about it.
Let's run back through it real quick. At 10, you've got Bibio, Phantom Brickworks. At 9, Aphex Twin, Selected, Ambient Works Volume 2. At 8, William Basinski, The Disintegration Loops. At 7, Brian Eno, Apollo. At 6, 9 Inch Nails, Quake. At 5, Tangerine Dream, Phaedra. At 4, The KLF, Chill Out. Then the top 3, we got number 3, Boards of Canada, Music Has the Right to Children. Number 2, Grouper, AIA, Alien Observer. And number 1, Hiroshi Yoshimura, Music for 9 Postcards. Feeling good?
I think the only thing I would switch in an ideal world is I would flip-flop Boards of Canada and the KLF. I think.
But other than that, you kind of nailed it.
Yeah, I feel pretty good about that. I think, like,
unbelievable.
Honestly, those top 3 are sort of interchangeable for me, and like I probably like the other 2 more than I like the Hiroshi Yoshimura record. But in terms of like, what do I think is a good starting point? What do I think is like kind of the ultimate classic? Like that one is great, and it was a life-changing record for me as somebody who wasn't like fully sold on the ambient fan experience. So like, probably has had a deeper impact on me as a music listener than any of the other records on that list. So
I've walked out of this show with 3 things. From the first segment, I got the KLF Chill Out. Second segment, I got Ulla that I need to listen to. And from this third segment, I've got Hiroshi Yoshimura, Music for 9 Postcards. This is the most I've learned in one of these episodes so far that I've done. Ted, thank you for doing this. Tell me a little bit about, or tell the listeners about where they can find you and what you've got coming up, keeping in mind that this will release on October 2nd.
Yeah, interesting. I used to be a lot more on social media than I am now, but I guess like I don't really use FKA Twitter as much, really. So just follow my Instagram, TDDBSSS. My name, no vowels, 3 S's. No real reason for the 3 S's, but... And
then can people come catch a DJ Stepdad set somewhere?
I've got a record coming up that I will be announcing shortly after this runs. So like if you follow me on Instagram, you'll get details there. I have like a super small tour around it. Nothing like, we're not like no world tour, but small tour for sure.
Well, if you're coming to Richmond, I'll come through. I'll pull up.
Dude, I'd love to play Richmond. I don't have a Richmond date, but that's a city I would like to play legitimately.
We'll get it. We'll get it all set up.
Hell yeah. But yeah, follow me on Instagram. Like I'll be posting about my record there. Got some real hard rocking press photos to go along with it. So you'll also get to see some photos of me smashing guitars, which I think is a nice juxtaposition to the vibey house music and the ambient criticism.
Amazing. I cannot wait. I'm going to check it out. Listeners, viewers, look, as always, at the end of all these shows, I remind you, if you want to support us, tapeclub.substack.com is the place to go. You'll get, these podcasts, you'll get a newsletter every 2 weeks, and then every 3 months or so, we make these little tapes. So here's an example of the September one. And if you go ahead and subscribe for $5 a month, I believe, every 3 months, you'll get a little box that's going to come with that tape plus 2 other ones. It's a great deal. It's a great time, and everyone has a lot of fun. Ted, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for doing this. Listeners and viewers, thank you for listening and viewing. And as always, I will see you next week here on the J-Card. Peace. The J-Card podcast is a fully independent production. It is made possible by listeners and viewers just like you. So if you want to support us, tapeclub.substack.com is the place to go.